Her way in the world. These are places you'll find hope, joy, and inspiration.
You flip a switch and you get light. You turn the kitchen faucet on, you get clean water. You open your fridge, you're greeted by a blast of cold air. These are the things that most of us take for granted, and most of us can't remember a time when they didn't happen. But they were extraordinary developments of the time, and they took extraordinary innovation to achieve. These innovations and more are all chronicled by the author Stephen Johnson in his new book and companion PBS series, both titled How We Got to Now. We sat down earlier this week and I began by asking him about the light bulb, which we all know Thomas Edison invented, right? Maybe not.
Maybe not.
Edison didn't really invent the light bulb. Every school kid is like, Thomas Edison invented the light bulb. But in fact, there were 20 other people in the decade or two leading up to Edison's version of the light bulb who basically hit upon the same solution. So there was something at that moment in history, a series of new scientific breakthroughs, understanding electricity, understanding the behavior of electricity in a vacuum, material science, that came together to make a light bulb imaginable. No one was even thinking about a light bulb 150 years before.
And Edison himself has always acknowledged that painstaking work of trial and error. He always says genius is 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. And I think this is in the book, who says I failed 1,000 times? I just found 1,000 ways not to do it, or something like that.
The other thing that he did that was really important is he built a model for innovation that then became central to the 20th century. So he had these kind of R&D labs, and he had a team of people who had very different skills. Right? He had people who were really good with material science. He had people who were really good with thinking about electricity. People who were good at thinking about large network systems. And he was good at kind of managing all of them and incentivizing all of them. And that was actually a new model for creativity and innovation that then became the kind of the 20th century template for that.
And then you have innovation that happens in one dimension and leaves something out. The story of the phonograph is really interesting.
Yeah. We always tell stories about these brave people in terms of their successes. But when you're on the cutting edge, you often have these weird blind spots where you can't see something. So there's this great, a little bit tragic story about this French inventor named Edward Leon Scott de Martinville, who invents a device for recording audio and gets a patent for it in 1855, which is 20 years before Edison invents the phonograph, right? So, everybody's like, I thought Edison invented the phonograph. This guy invented it? And I said, well, the reason you haven't heard of him is that he invented a device that would capture sound waves brilliantly, take them in and kind of inscribe them on this rotating cylinder. Great idea. But he failed to include a mechanism for playing back that audio. So there was no way to listen to it. You could record it, but it was just sitting there as a bunch of scribbles. And what I love about it is it wasn't that he was trying to do this. It never even occurred to him. Right? It just was completely in his blind spot. And it eventually took people like Edison and actually Graham Bell, who used that technology to invent the telephone, to come up with a system that could record audio and then play it back.
One of the best parts of the book is recognizing the spillover and unintended consequences of innovation, and I think that's the thing that sort of powers the world in a way these days. Is one thing leads to another. And tell the story of what you call cold and how ice transformed the world.
It is really one of the most fun things about both the book and the show. You get taken on these kind of surprising adventures, and the story of coal. We always think about fire as the ultimate early innovation. But we've been doing that for 100,000 years. We've been, cooking food with fire and so on. But we've only really been tinkering with artificial cold for about 200 years. And it started with the ice trade. There was this massive business built up in the early 19th century of people cutting huge chunks of ice from frozen lakes in New England and shipping them to Bombay and Rio and the Caribbean. This guy, Frederick Tudor, who we talk about, made a fortune doing this. And it sounds crazy, but the ice was just something that never showed up in those places, and you could actually keep the ice from melting in a ship for that long, which is extraordinary. So, but that created then a demand for artificial cold, and things like refrigerators and then air conditioning were invented. And the extraordinary thing is when air conditioning enters the mainstream kind of household in the United States right after World War II, it triggers one of the, if not the biggest migration of human beings in the United States history, as everyone moves from the colder northern states to the hot Sunbelt states, the desert states and Florida and so on, places that were very hard to live before air conditioning. And that migration initiates a huge swing in the electoral college, where there's almost 50 vote swing from north to south because of air conditioning. And